First things first, what is the CLE? Well, if you look at the Mercedes lineup, you'll notice there is no longer a C-Class coupe and convertible and an E-Class coupe and convertible. Mercedes realized that people just aren't buying coupes and convertibles in the numbers they once were, so they merged the two models together to create the CLE coupe and the CLE convertible. That logically puts this in a world between the BMW 4 Series and the 8 Series and above the Audi A5. Dimensionally, this is closer to the outgoing Mercedes-Benz E-Class than the outgoing C-Class, but there are a few areas where it is a bit closer to that C-Class, and architecturally, it is closely related to the Mercedes-Benz C-Class sedan. Price-wise though, again, $67,600 starting, definitely puts this in a different category than some of the competition, and if you get carried away with options on the AMG model, and it's only an AMG 53, you can get up there to around $100,000 or more. Design-wise, the CLE has a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and a whole lot of angry grille going on up front, especially if you get the AMG version, where we do get a different grille insert versus the rest of the lineup. We have full LED headlights, as you'd expect, but no LED fog lights down below. In terms of body width, this is actually wider than the outgoing E-Class coupe and convertible. Styling is definitely a matter of personal preference, but I think the CLE looks fantastic with this long hood profile, thanks to the inline-six engine under there, the short overhang that we definitely don't find in the Audi. I think this looks better than the 4 Series or the A5. Does it look better than the BMW 8 Series? Not to my eye, but the 8 Series is significantly more expensive, starting over $100,000, so more than this well-equipped AMG model. Because again, this is kind of a tweener in a lot of different ways. Architecturally, it shares a great deal with the C-Class sedan. Dimensionally, it's actually a little bit closer to the old E-Class coupe and convertible than the old C-Class coupe and convertible. In a few exceptions though. Rear legroom, headroom, those are a little bit below the older model. But Mercedes has gotten really good at blending features around. So you'll notice that we find features available in the CLE that you don't find in the C-Class sedan. And that's part of what helps put it in a slightly different category than simply being a C-Class coupe convertible replacing the old C and the old E. We also have a bigger trunk than either of the previous models had. And the convertible top doesn't go into the trunk. It actually goes into this separate section right here, something that I discovered was really handy because if you're backing up out of a parking spot, for instance, and you want the convertible top up or down, the backup camera continues to work even when the top is in motion. Here's a better look at what's going on. We have the separate compartment for the lid. We then have the fabric top there. Glass section is still down there. The whole process can be done while you're in motion at speeds of around 30 miles an hour as well. So you don't have to worry about that light turning green and having the top partially open or partially closed and holding up traffic while it's completing its operation. Mercedes also thought about wind buffering, so back here we have a little panel that rises up to help reduce the air curling around the cabin. If you've ever been out on the freeway in a convertible, you notice that air can actually kind of come around there. This stops that. Mercedes wouldn't be Mercedes if they stopped there, of course, so we have an airfoil on the top of the windscreen to help move air over the passenger cabin and reduce buffeting at higher speeds. And then, of course, we get the air scarf integrated into the head restraint that helps heat your neck with a flow of air back there that doesn't require that the engine be warm first. Definitely handy right now since it is apparently 43 degrees outside and foggy, and yes, it is May. The light show on the CLE is perhaps not quite as impressive as some of the other Mercedes models, but we still have full LED taillight modules. We have amber turn signals, but they've tinted the entire module red, so that way it blends in a little bit better with the rear end. The rear is also really easy to clean because we have a lot of smooth, sleek lines on the back, kind of similar to some of Mercedes-Benz EVs. Of course, not EV-like are the quad exhaust tips down at the bottom. If you're lucky enough to get a CLE outside the United States, you won't have these weird bumps on either side of the license plate. That's simply due to Mercedes-Benz particular interpretation of North American bumper regulations. They don't really need to be there, and you could swap in a European lower bumper if you were so inclined. Helping complete the sleek look, we have a center brake light that is silver tinted, matching that satin chrome surround. If I put my foot on the brake pedal, you can see it light up there. At the moment in the US, you have the choice of 3 different engines, but all of them are going to be mated to a 9-speed automatic transmission, and all will have all-wheel drive standard. Definitely something that separates this from a more mainstream option like a Mustang convertible or something like that. The base engine is a 4-cylinder turbo producing 255 horsepower, and Mercedes says it will get you 0 to 60 in 6.2 seconds. If you want to go significantly faster than that, you can get the CLE 450, which gives you an inline-6 engine producing 375 horsepower, 369 pound-feet of torque, and it will do 0 to 60 in 4.2. If you want to go a little bit faster, but you also want the rest of the AMG treatment, you want the one we're looking at today, which is the CLE 53. This uses that same core inline-6 engine with an electric supercharger and a couple other tweaks here and there to bump power up to 443 horsepower, torque all the way up to 413 pound-feet. Mercedes says this will go 0 to 60 in 4 seconds, but I can tell you they're lying. It is a little bit quicker than that. As much as I love V8s, I have to admit, I think I like inline-6 engines a little bit more. They just have that unique sound to them, and they're buttery smooth, of course, because it's a naturally balanced engine design. We also have a nearly perfect weight balance because most of the engine is behind the front axle. Only a little bit of it in the accessories here are in front of the front axle. And that's definitely different than what we find in the Audi, because in the Audi, every engine is entirely in front of the front axle due to the way that Audi has integrated the all-wheel drive system into the transmission case. Now, as you might imagine, we get more legroom on the inside than we find in the 4 Series, but less than we find in the 8 Series. It's about 2 inches apart from either of those, so pretty firmly in the middle. Like other Mercedes models, you won't find the seat controls down here on the seat. They're over here on the driver's door. And this model has the full suite of seating technology. We have seating ventilation, seating heating. We have the air scarf back here where it's blowing hot air on your neck. I can turn that on now since it is a little bit chilly outside. And what I like about this is that it's not using coolant from the engine to heat the air. It's actually has its own separate electric element inside, so it doesn't require that the engine get warm first. We also have front seat massage, and this has the latest Mercedes massage feature where the seat not only pushes you in the back with little air bladders, it also has a vibrating function, but only on the driver's seat. The passenger seat has almost the exact same range of motion as the driver's seat, including the massage. It just doesn't do the added vibration while it's doing the massage. Getting into the back seat is pretty easy. We have a power mechanism, of course, as you'd expect in a luxury convertible. Press that little flap there, and eventually this seat will start motoring itself forward, right like that. You'll notice the headrest also moves down, so that way it doesn't bop on the ceiling. And speaking of head restraints, this is a 4-way adjustable head restraint. It's important to remember that more legroom does not necessarily mean a great deal of legroom, but sitting back here behind myself, I can actually do it. With this seat all the way back in place, and it does remember its setting, my knees are touching the front seat back. However, with this seat in this position, there's really no way I could fit back there on that side, but let's see if I can stop the seat before it goes all the way back so you can get a better idea of what's going on. Oh, actually it does. Hits my knees, it actually moves forward a little bit. That's a handy touch back there. The rear seats are very, very upright, so they're not the most comfortable, obviously, but compared to the other entries in the compact segment, for sure, these are definitely a little bit more comfortable. Not quite as comfortable, again, as the ones in the 8 Series. This is a 4-seat vehicle only. We do have child seat anchors back here, which I find funny. If you have a booster seat or a forward-facing seat, you're probably going to be okay. I don't imagine anybody's really going to be able to squeeze a rear-facing seat behind, especially a taller adult up front. The rear seats fold in a 60-40 fashion, which is interesting since we don't have a middle seat there. That's where we find the top tether anchors, by the way, is on that back. And then we have a bit of a cargo slot back there into the trunk. The cargo slot is logically the reason we have the 60-40 folding design, because as you can see, it's pretty centered back there in the rear bench, and it's not that wide. It's not the entire width of that folding section. That's due to the structure required, of course, to give this a convertible top. Behind the trunk lid, which is incidentally not powered, we find just under 12 cubic feet of cargo capacity, and you can use a bit more space if you move this little divider right here and the top is up. So if you're going away for a weekend and you want to pack a little bit heavier, you're okay with the top being up rather than down, you do get a bit more space. But you can stick about 3 of these 22-inch roller bags. These are the largest you can carry on to a domestic flight back here. You can stuff 2 under that section, and then you could put another one in this position right here, scoot it over, put a little bit of small hand luggage to the side. But again, we're not talking about a very big vehicle, so logically, we're not talking about a huge trunk. Under the floor, we have a teeny tiny little bit of additional space. This is where they put a cargo divider. We also have the tow hook there, but as we see in a lot of European vehicles, no spare tire. We do, however, find the fuse panel back there on the side. All right, let's see what $97,000 buys you on the inside. Again, there's that airfoil integrated into the windscreen area. Over here we have really fairly small sun visors. I always wish that convertibles had slightly larger sun visors, but they do slide to the side, which is handy. We just don't have two of them or anything like that. We have the controls for the passenger seat, very similar to the driver's seat right over there on the door. Speakers pretty much everywhere, including actually kind of a nice touch. I'll take a look at them a little bit more on the driver's side, but up there right by the side view mirror as well. Obviously, lots of expensive materials going on here, lots of soft touch and stitched materials on the seats. We have leather upholstery in here, although leather upholstery is not standard. Here's a better look at that air scarf. You can see it's a vent right there at the base of the head restraint, and hot air comes out. You can adjust it via the buttons on the door. Again, those head restraints go up, down, and in and out. On the back, we find, again, that cargo pass-through right there. Perforations on all the seats, but we only find the ventilation up front. We have an extending thigh cushion and the seat massage in this particular model. Moving all the way over to the doors and the dashboard, we find carbon fiber trim here, kind of a silvery accent there on the dash, more stitched leather up there at the top. You can get a head-up display, but this model does not have it. We have all the ambient lighting you'd expect in a modern Mercedes model, and these air vents with the little knob that opens and closes the vent. These are positioned quite high on the dash, so if you prefer more air on your body, they may be a little bit high, especially considering the positioning of this screen. Now, what's interesting about this screen and this model is that we have this little button down here. We can actually have the screen tilt up and tilt back. That is a lot handier than I thought it would be, because if you're driving around in strong sunlight, you can change the angle so you can reduce the glare or just see the screen better. Or if you're shorter and you just want to be able to access those buttons, that is certainly going to be a lot easier. This has one of the latest versions of the Mercedes M-Bucks infotainment system. You can see we have things like our seat comfort here. This is where we choose our seat massage options. You'll notice that not all the options are available for the passenger seat. So the passenger seat can't get deep waves or deep workout, because those are the ones that vibrate the seat as well. Below the touchscreen, we have a touch panel. This may be a bit difficult to see in the glare, but we have an AMG button that takes you over to the AMG drive modes on the screen. We have a parking assistant button that gives you that 360-degree camera. We have a lot of lumber there on the side of the driveway for an addition to the house. And then over here, we have a button that takes us over to certain vehicle settings. This is handy because the active steering assist and lane keeping assist are definitely things that I like to turn off. We have the hazard light button, fingerprint sensor, power button there, the button to tilt the screen, and then a volume touch control here. You can tap it up and down, or you can slide your finger around right like that. But you notice that one thing we still don't have here are dedicated track forward-backward buttons, aside from the touch buttons there in the infotainment system. That's one thing I really wish Mercedes would address, but they seem really resistant to doing that. Then down here we have a lot of shiny black, piano black plastic. That's definitely going to scratch easily. Under this panel, we have two cup holders that are not symmetrical. So the one on the driver's side is smaller than the one on the right. That is odd, because some of those larger takeout drinks you can fit over here, but you can't over there. And even just regular 12-ounce cans of soda, they don't really fit quite right in this one over here, but they will fit on that side. I do think that's a little bit of a misstep. I think they could have arranged them so simply regular soda cans could fit in. We have the Qi wireless charging mat tucked up way under there, so there's really no way to get the phone in and out if you are using those cup holders. Now back here we have the controls that I mentioned earlier. This is the one to open the roof, this one is the one to close the roof, and this one is the one that raises and lowers the wind baffle on the front and on the rear. Back here we have a button to open the bifold armrest. Keep in mind the transmission and all-wheel drive system live basically under the vehicle, so not a terribly large storage compartment, but we do have a USB-C port inside. On the driver's side, we don't have a head-up display, but we do have their fantastically configurable LCD instrument cluster. There are a bunch of different views you can choose from, including this really futuristic super sport view. We also have that classic view, a navigation only view, the assistance view, and a service view, which I find a little bit less useful. Moving out from there, we have a 3-spoke AMG steering wheel. You can see that the spokes are split. So the left spoke has some buttons up top and bottom with that little itty bitty spoke there. We also have these button modules below. These are configurable and they have a little LCD inside. So if I click this button, it brings up a menu over there on the infotainment system. If I rotate the button, you can see it changes along with the drive mode. Over here, we get something different. If I click the button, it changes its function. So rotating through things like the active vents on the exhaust, we have these suspension. Over here we have something a little bit different. If I tap the button, you'll notice it rotates through different options, and that tells the vehicle what you want this little button module below to do. So if I press this, it opens the flaps, closes the flaps here. It's going to change the suspension mode through those different suspension settings. I can then tap it again, get the manual mode for the transmission. That's kind of a handy touch. Over here we have the controls for the adaptive cruise control. These buttons refer to controlling that screen over there, whereas the nearly identical module here controls the main screen on that side. We then have a volume slider, but again, no track up-down buttons. We do, however, have up-down paddles for the transmission, so gear shifts right there, and the gear selector, that's a stock behind the steering wheel. Here's a closer look at the driver's door. You can see that we have a speaker grill integrated into this location. That turns out to be one of my favorite spots for a speaker. I was really surprised by how sharp the audio imaging is in this vehicle, with the speakers in that position and of course the center channel speaker in more of a traditional location. There are obviously speakers in the doors, speakers in the back, etc., but this position really did work quite well whether the windows are open or closed out on the road. As we get the CLE out on the road, I have to admit that one of the reasons this is my favorite convertible is because it's a good all-weather convertible. And in Northern California, summers can be like this a great deal, where we have a lot of overcast in the morning, fog, etc. And this is the kind of vehicle where you don't have to wait until skies clear up to go topless, because as long as it's not raining, it's actually pretty warm in here thanks to the way that the anti-buffeting measures have been done, both front and back. The neck scarf, the heated seats, the fact that you can ventilate the seat at the same time that you're heating it so that way you don't get sweaty, and just the fact that there's not a lot of wind noise even with the top down inside. This is a really, really comfortable luxury convertible. And it sounds pretty good as long as the exhaust flaps are open. So if I accelerate here, we get very smooth, clean inline six sounds. But if I open the exhaust flaps, you definitely get a little bit more drama. It's never gonna sound like an M product from BMW though. That's not the Mercedes way of tuning their inline six, but it is gonna have a strong, healthy burble inside the cabin and outside the cabin. And of course, it's backed up by pretty solid performance. In our 0 to 60 measurements, this model took 3.9 seconds to go 0 to 60, so just a little bit faster than the Mercedes numbers. 60 to 0, it took 105 feet. So this is a really short stopping vehicle. Not the shortest, of course, because obviously the removal of the top increases weight in a vehicle like this because of the added structure. So it is going to take less time for the coupe version to stop from 60 miles an hour or some of those M products as well. This is not quite as hardcore as some of the competition. Again, competition is really limited and tricky here, but there are more hardcore options out there. The CLE is not exactly a big convertible, but if you frequently find yourself out on really tight winding mountain roads like this, it's amazing the difference that rear wheel steering makes. I was able to drive a base version of the CLE thanks to a local dealer that lent me one for a few hours. And without the rear wheel steer, it definitely has a different feel. Feels a little bit bigger. Again, we're not talking about a very big vehicle, but this practically makes the CLE feel like some sort of micro car or perhaps a roadster with a much smaller wheelbase. On the other hand, it can make it feel just a tad artificial at times. On the other hand, you will definitely be able to more easily do things in this that you may not be willing to do in something like a Ford Mustang or something along those rear-wheel drive lines. It's definitely going to take a bit more skill and a bit more attention to drive fast out on your favorite winding mountain road. That's one of the reasons I love all-wheel drive in a vehicle like this. The added traction is fantastic. You don't have to worry about the rear end kicking out on you because you really have to work it in order to get this to feel lively in the back. Now that does not mean this feels front heavy like an Audi A5 can. Quite the opposite, because again, this has a near perfect weight balance thanks to the positioning of that inline six engine. So around corners like this, when you floor it, it definitely has that rear power bias feel, but it's not going to be tail happy and out of control. This feels really precise, really buttoned down all the time. And that's why when it comes to handling, I'm going to give this an A, with the caveat that there are going to be extreme performance convertibles logically that are going to handle better than this, but in the $90,000 range, actually even in the $70,000 range where this starts, I think all CLEs handle really, really well. And if I were to choose the way that the steering and the way everything came together in a new car, except for the lack of feedback, this is exactly how I would dial in my own car. The firmer suspension versus the rest of the CLE lineup is definitely obvious out on a rougher road like the one that we're on here. I was able to sample, again, a CLE 300 from a local dealer, and that base model was definitely cushier than the model we're looking at here. Some people might find it a bit too cushy. It's important to remember that this is more of a grand tourer than an outright hardcore performance vehicle. That possibly is what a CLE 63 or something like that could be in the future. But for this model, even in the AMG version, this is daily driver livable. It's just that you're going to feel more of the road imperfections on a road surface like this. And you're certainly going to get those potholes coming through into the cabin, even in comfort mode. So when it comes to the ride score, I'm going to give this model a B-, because it is a little on the firm side. And because of the tires we have on this model, it also is pulling up all the gravel from the road. You can definitely hear that clanking into the wheel wells. It does, however, handle those potholes really nicely without getting the suspension upset or without them really jarring the cabin too much. It's just that you feel everything, including the smaller little bumps in the road. Oddly enough, back out on the paved road is where you're going to notice the firmer suspension more than on that rougher gravel road, because here we feel every small bump and imperfection in the road, but it handles those potholes relatively well. So again, keep that in mind if you plan on taking this on one of those longer road trips. Also keep in mind that cabin noise could be a little bit lower. We measured 71 decibels in here at 50 miles an hour, and that is on our new decibel rating schedule because they recently repaved the road that we test vehicles on. The big thing that I noticed is wind noise from right over here to the left of the driver, and actually over there to the right of the front passenger as well. We do get a bit more wind noise at higher speeds there than I might like, and that can be a little bit distracting on longer road trips. Road noise well controlled, wind noise could be a little bit better. Fuel economy though, that has been surprisingly good. Over a week of mixed driving, we've been averaging 25.5 miles per gallon. That's a little bit better than we really should be getting in a vehicle like this, but that's thanks to the fact that this isn't just a performance drivetrain. It's also a hybrid drivetrain, interestingly enough, although Mercedes tries to shy away from that hybrid description just a little bit. We have a relatively healthy electric motor between the engine and the transmission, and that can allow this vehicle to turn off the engine in situations that other vehicles simply can't. For instance, if you're in hotter weather, the electric air conditioning compressor will continue running to continue cooling the cabin and allow you to save fuel in those situations where, in other cars, you might want to turn off the auto start-stop system. It also enables this start-stop system to be very smooth. The engine turned off back there, fired back up, and immediately we took off because that electric motor is producing well over 100 pound-feet of torque. So in regular driving, it really helps get you going without you really paying attention to what the engine is doing, especially if you have the top up and you have the exhaust valves closed. It's really quiet on the inside. Quite simply, the CLE is the kind of convertible that's really easy to live with. Handling is fantastic, my neck is warm, my butt's getting a massage right now. As long as you can afford it, there's not too much more you could ask for. I'm foregoing the usual pricing and comparison section for a few reasons. First off, I don't know how many CLE shoppers actually care. The second thing is there's nothing really to compare this against because it's not a 4 Series, it's not an A5, it's not an 8 Series, and it's certainly not a Mustang or some of those other convertibles out there. It really lives in its own little sub-segment. And that's logical because that's exactly what Mercedes intended to do with this. And I sort of wish that BMW and Audi would follow suit because the A5 doesn't make as much sense as perhaps something more this size, more in between segments. And BMW with the 4 Series and the 8 Series, they're not exactly selling like hotcakes together either. They might as well just merge them back into a 6 Series convertible. But that's just me. Who knows what they're up to? If you have about $85,000 to spend on your next convertible, I would absolutely get one of these. But I think I would skip the AMG version and stop at the CLE 450 because this AMG started at $82,600 plus destination, of course. For this model here, we're talking about $97,000 as equipped, but you could get the CLE 450 starting at $75,800. And any way you slice it, that CLE 450 is going to be about $7,000 less expensive. Not everything you can get on the AMG is available on the CLE 450, but performance is not too far off. The CLE 450 is a little bit more comfortable as well. The handling is already fantastic on that model. Yes, it is sharper on this AMG, but the fact that the steering is a little bit on the lifeless side, I don't know whether that's the four-wheel steering and the way that that's interacting on your favorite winding mountain road, but sometimes the steering is just a little peculiar in this model. Just for me, I think it makes more sense as a luxury grand touring style vehicle rather than a sporty AMG model like this. I do appreciate that this is not the full-on rock-hard ultimate AMG expression. This is the 53, sort of the mid-level in the AMG lineup. Who knows, maybe that next level is coming to the CLE, but at the moment, again, we just have the 3 flavors. If you can afford it, I would step up to the CLE 450. The CLE 300 is nice. It's a little bit softer than the rest of the lineup. I was able to sample one again from a local dealer, and I do like that model, but I think the 450 is where it really just comes together. We get that inline-6 sound, the inline-6 smoothness, we get a whole lot of power, significantly better performance than the base model, but it's really only about 0.3 of a second slower 0 to 60 than this AMG. So again, I think that's just where I would stop. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comments section below, and let me know why are people not buying convertibles anymore? Convertibles used to sell really quite well in the United States. There was a time where a lot of people had convertibles for the weekend. And in the luxury segment, luxury shoppers are still buying convertibles as secondary vehicles, third vehicles, fourth vehicles, etc. Remember that new car shoppers are the kind of people that could afford one of these for a weekend and something else for the weekday. So the relative increasing cost of convertibles, I'm just not sure how big of a factor that is for the convertible intender. People just don't seem to be as interested in them as coupe SUVs. I do find that a little sad. Let me know what you think about that down there in the comment section below, and I'll see all of you next week. Hopefully you are staying warm and dry because the fog is starting to drip even more as we speak.